Council received $18 million last year for their state budget, and you would be correct. But you might also want to ask yourself, how much did Baker suggest in January should be the Mass Cultural Council budget? And the answer is 16.3 million. So we're going to take this as a win, because there was the very real possibility that he was going to cut a lot deeper into the budget, and we would have been at a much farther place in the starting blocks in terms of advocating to the legislature. That we're at 16.3 is a great place to start, and we're going to continue to press as we sort of get a better sense of how the legislature is actually going to debate and develop their fiscal year 21 budget. Baker has said he very much wants to see a fiscal year 21 final budget on his desk by Thanksgiving. I think we're crossing our fingers that happens too. They did file a 1-month extension budget for November to make sure that the state's operations can continue through the month of November, because we know the 3-month spending bill ends on October 31st. But that's sort of what we're going to see happen. Then the other thing that happened yesterday is that Baker released this very large, I think it's $177 million, no, it's $747 million economic relief plan. Incorporated into that is his whole eviction diversion program. But there's also some new things that came out yesterday. There was a lot of announced grant relief and grant programs for small businesses, but there was also included $10 million for arts and cultural organizations. So if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide. To date, right? We are talking about 69.3 million in potential new state funds for the creative sector since sort of COVID kicked off in March. And that's significant and that's meaningful. And I can draw a very, very clear line straight from our collective advocacy efforts, the number of emails we've sent, the number of calls we've sent, the number of items we've sent out to our audiences and our networks around these issues, to the fact that we've been able to at least get close to $69.3 million in potential new state funds. So let's break that down. That's the $10 million for Baker's Economic Recovery Plan, which is pending. There's $2 million in the fiscal year 20 COVID-19 CARES spending supplemental budget. What a long title that is. That was signed into law, and there's $2 million for small cultural nonprofits. Then in the Economic Development Bond Bill, between the House version and the Senate version, there's $31 million authorized new spending to support the arts and cultural community. Then there is the 16.3 recommendation from Baker's revised budget, which is now with the legislature. And then there's $10 million in cultural facilities funds that are already authorized to be spent in this fiscal year and are going to be distributed through the joint grant program of the Mass Cultural Council and Mass Development. So this is really meaningful, okay? And it's because we have not let up, right? And it's not just my voice, right? Like I have said this many times, I'm sure to some people I'm charming, but when many voices are talking in unison, it makes a significant difference. So we are gonna take we're gonna take 2 minutes and we're gonna pat ourselves on the back. If you have the thumbs up little emoji, whatever noise, whatever reactions you'd like to have, let's have them, because now I'm gonna say, we gotta keep going. There's still a lot more ahead of us, and it's going to take all of our concerted and sort of concentrated and sustained advocacy work to get us moving forward. So there's a couple of things right now that I want to just put in the chat box that are going to help us. So in July, the Mass Cultural Council was able to release the results of their third COVID economic impact survey. And that was shared with legislators right around the time that the Economic Development Bill went into debate in the House and Senate. And I would heartily vote or bet that we were able to get that 31 million combined between the two because we had strong data to make our case. So the Mass Cultural Council is holding a fourth economic impact update survey, and I need every single one of us to take part in that. This is so crucial to our work together. So they've created one survey for individuals and one survey for organizations. You'll see it in the chat box. And then the third item is that MassCreative officially today has launched a new year-long ongoing messaging campaign called #ArtsAndCultureForMass. And this campaign is really about lifting up the stories of how arts and culture and individuals who work within our sector and our community are making a difference in their neighborhoods and with their networks and their communities. So right now we're just sort of starting to share these stories, but starting in January, we're gonna be theming months. So we might have an Arts Ed for Mass month where we're talking about the power and the impact that arts education have to developing our next generation of community leaders, right? We'll probably have an Arts and Health for Mass month coming up. G, our Director of Engagement and Organizing, is leading this project, and you can check out more about that. I've put a link in the chat box and you can learn more about that campaign. But this sort of case making and storytelling, this is the backbone of our advocacy work, and it's really important that we continue to move in that direction. So Erica, you mentioned in the chat, Emily, can you clarify, is this for nonprofit cultural orgs only? So yes, so that $10 million that was included in Baker's Economic Recovery Plan is for nonprofit arts and cultural organizations. Within that recovery plan, there is also a significant amount for small business recovery and relief, as well as technical assistance. And so for our for-profit arts and cultural partners on this call, I think there's a way, and we're going to be learning in real time together how to navigate this and make sure that we are eligible for everything that we can. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, I'm going to give you the same spiel I gave you 2 weeks ago because it's still relevant and it still matters. But, Erica's asking, is the survey for nonprofits only? I think it is, Erica, but I would also urge you to maybe still fill it out, because I think we need to make sure that we're capturing as much data around this. And someone who's on this call from the Mass Cultural Council can slap my wrist after the call about that, but I'm gonna encourage everybody to fill that out. So talking about creating the vote. So here is a really fun little statistic that our friends at the Mass Inc. polling group shared the other day. So as of October 20th, we are at 40% of total eligible voter turnout for the 2020 election. We're at 40%, and we are well over 50% of all of the votes cast in 2016. If you, like me, enjoy a good data map, enjoy this in the chat box. It's the early vote tracker that can show you, it's like, really, I got excited about this because it shows you how many early votes have been cast per town or city, how many, by what type, right? Is it in person or is it by mail? And the thing that I want to really draw your eye to is in its beautiful mauve color scheme. It tells a story that communities that happen to have a higher tax base, that happen to have a higher median income, have participated and already voted. So I think Boston is at about 17% of recorded voter turnout. Yep. Whereas, let me pick on Lexington, is at 51% turnout. So forgive me for those folks who live in Lexington, it is a higher median income. So this is a story about why it matters that we vote and why it matters that we share the importance of voting with everyone in our communities and our networks. And on this slide, you will see many ways that you can engage in that. I want to encourage you as well, I think this really matters, is that don't go into the voting booth unprepared. So you can, give me 1 second. I'm gonna put a link in the chat where you can check and see if your status to register to vote is active, right? Which is a good practice for all of us. But once you log in, it's also gonna show you your sample ballot. So you can see every single candidate for running for election in your ward or precinct. And I would encourage all of us as educated and informed civic leaders and arts advocates to make sure that we know and we've seen what those races are and who's running for those races. Because I think we've seen recently in a number of examples in a number of places how every race, not just the presidential race, has impacted racial and social justice issues, has impacted support for the environment, and impacted the support for arts and culture. So let's go into our ballot booths very prepared this year. While I tried to go into my ballot booth this morning, unfortunately Somerville's line was well out the door and around the corner. I was so excited, but I will be going probably Monday midday. Any Somerville residents want to join me, we can say hello from 6 feet away. So that is my update for right now. Dan asks, is there a grant application link for the $10 million for the nonprofit funding from Governor Baker? Great question, Dan. No, there isn't. So basically, like, this announcement was made yesterday. And what we understand is that the administration is going to give more details about how they plan to roll this out in the coming week. And so the Mass Cultural Council, which I think has been incredibly responsive in the midst of this entire pandemic, as soon as they have an understanding of how to do this, they will be rolling it out. What I'm hearing from my sources is that the Baker administration has said very clearly that the goal is to get this money out there of everyone's doors as soon as possible. So I think it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround. Johanna reminds us it is an early voting this weekend, and tomorrow is the last day to register to vote in the November 3rd election. This is very true. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, that's all I have today. I really hope everyone enjoys that early voting map. It was just a dream to go through for me. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Emily. And yes, everyone, make sure you have a voting plan. If you have questions, there are plenty of people here who are willing to help. Before we switch gears, I did see one question in the chat for Taylor. I think, Taylor, you're still here. There was one question about, are there any specific data that clarify why the zip codes are above citywide numbers?
So we do have neighborhood data on our website at bphc.org. And as we all know, COVID-19 is impacting our communities of color more than our white residents. And if you notice that those communities that I mentioned, East Boston, Dorchester, Hyde Park, are all communities that have majority people of color residents. So just a reminder for all of us that health equity is important and is something to look at as we move forward. But I would just really encourage everyone to do their part and wear face coverings, maintain social distance. Those are the things that we're going to continue to work for. We are doing specific targeted outreach to those communities. We're having volunteers go to local businesses and hand out COVID care kits. You might see folks, if you live in a 12121 or a 12122, see them out in parks and such, handing out masks and educational things. So we are addressing those neighborhood inequities as well as through our mobile testing by targeting those communities. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Taylor. All right.
I think there was one question. Dan had a follow-up question. Will this be MCC or I think independently, because MCC already has their 11/16 grant deadlines?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan. I was actually typing in the chat box to respond to you, but I will, thank you, Cara, for giving me the opportunity to answer it. So this is going to be, so the $10 million that Baker announced yesterday will be distributed by the Mass Cultural Council. It will be, I would imagine, its own distinct grant program. So it's not about the LCCs. It's not about the Cultural Facilities Fund, which I know are two grant programs that are already sort of out live in the field. So there will be more details coming about this, but it's not, you will not find anything related to this on their website. And I think we're going to need to just take a beat and wait to see how they plan to roll it out, but it will be its own distinct grant program.
Thanks, Emily.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that our next guest, Lori, can be able to share their screen and show the slides about the work that they're doing at D4SI.
Thanks, Pascal. And thanks, Cara. It's great to be here with y'all. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen and share some work, but just before I share my screen, just a reminder that I'm not that good at multitasking while my screen is up and I can't see y'all. So feel free to add something in the chat if you want to stop and ask a question, or shout it out if you can unmute yourself. Don't be shy. If someone else sees it and I haven't seen it, just stop me. I'm happy to stop anytime and kind of go deeper on an area that you have a question. There we are. I was invited to come and share a little bit of our work at the Design Studio for Social Intervention and some of the ways that we're thinking about this moment particularly. If you don't know us, we're a little outfit. We're based in Upham's Corner. We do work across the city of Boston and across the country, and when we're lucky and when it's not COVID, sometimes outside of the country as well. We're an artistic research and development outfit. So really thinking with designers, activists, artists, residents, academics about how we take on complex social problems, and doing that in a variety of ways. We've been fortunate to do a lot of creative placemaking along the Fairmount Cultural Corridor, which is the communities along the Fairmount line in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Hyde Park. We've done some civic engagement, both nationally and here in Boston, getting to do work with the Upham's Corner Arts Innovation District in the city and with Go Boston 2030. We love having artist residencies and fellowships and thinking with artists in a variety of ways, as well as doing some technical assistance, creativity labs, and getting to design our own social interventions around issues that we care deeply about. We really love this piece from Arundhati Roy at the beginning of the pandemic as we're thinking about this moment that we're in. And she says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. A lot of what we think about is how we imagine that next world. And the book that we came out with awkwardly during the pandemic, Ideas, Arrangements, Effects. It's kind of odd to drop a book during a pandemic and it really kills your book tour. But the content is remarkably relevant because we are really thinking about how this pandemic, this moment has really changed so many arrangements. And our framework is really thinking about how ideas are embedded within arrangements, and arrangements produce effects. As folks who have been fighting negative effects and doing activism for a long time, we often see a skill set among folks challenging power of tracing negative effects back to big ideas. So we can trace the negative effects on communities of color in terms of high COVID rates and higher morbidity rates to a lot of the institutional racism, tracing it back to big ideas around racism, but not always able to look at arrangements as really a terrain that we might start to reimagine. So I want to kind of dig in a little bit around why we use those words and what do we mean, and then get into like how might it be useful for you if it is in your work with arts organizations, with artists, and really helping folks think about this moment and take it on. The arrangement of a classroom is a really simple, common experience. Almost all of us, if not all of us, have been in some way a student or a teacher or both. And we think about how easily we can arrange chairs. We have chairs and rows. The idea embedded in that arrangement, right, is that this teacher has knowledge and the students need it. Whereas on the right, we have chairs in a circle where the teacher is sitting with their students, with the idea being that we all have knowledge and experience that we're sharing. And we're not saying that one arrangement is better than the other, but to understand that ideas are embedded in these arrangements, and these arrangements are producing effects. When we talk about ideas, we're thinking both about like the big sturdy ideas, racism, classism, capitalism, colonialism, all kinds of things, and then small and tricky ideas and the relationships between the two. And I think that's really relevant because we can be a little flat-footed when we think that racism only exists when you say something or do something explicitly racist, when instead our sort of lives growing up in this country means that there's ways that we perpetuate racism in our organizations, even when we're trying to be anti-racist, right? So how we label a community safe or unsafe, or how we create a space that we imagine to be welcoming, and who is it welcoming to? Or if we're hiring, right, who do we see as a good employee or hardworking? How do we have these other ideas that can get tangled in ideas around sexism or homophobia or racism? And really, how do we kind of figure out and unpack those things so that we're not perpetuating racism? When we think about the arrangements that ideas are embedded in, we talk about both hard and soft arrangements. Hard being like the structural, physical, literal arrangements, physical architecture, streets, roads, buildings, the computer that you're looking at right now, or the desk that it's sitting on, or wherever it's sitting, your dining room table. But also the soft arrangements, the social arrangements, the schedules or the expectations, or thoughts about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or traffic, that kind of thing. And we use the word arrangements because we want folks to understand that things are rearrangeable. And we know that chairs are rearrangeable. And we know that we've rearranged our houses because a lot of us are working from home. But how do we imagine larger things as rearrangeable? And how do we also understand them as being arranged? So we have some pictures here just to sort of think about. These are different interventions and creative placemaking things that we've done, right? So some examples of soft and hard arrangements. Folks can just throw in the chat if you want, like what are some of the hard and soft arrangements that you see here? My chat box is not coming up. Here we are. If anyone wants to add to the chat, some hard and soft arrangements here, or we can keep going. Metal bars on curbs to prevent skateboarding. Absolutely. So we have a hard arrangement of the curb and the metal bar, and then we have soft arrangements of skateboarding or expectations or who's the sidewalk for, who are the streets for, right? Are they just for cars? Are they for pedestrians? Are they for bikes? I commute along American Legion Highway, so we just had some different ideas about how traffic should be moving there and if there should be a bike lane and if people should be able to park at Franklin Park. So that mixture, right? Always the overlapping of hard and soft arrangements. Thanks, Emily. This is an arrangement that many of us are in. We have the arrangement now of working from home with its hard and soft and overlapping arrangements, and as well as the arrangement of essential worker, folks who are oftentimes at risk, you know, stocking our grocery shelves, delivering our food, working in our nursing homes and hospitals. So I'd love to think together, just pause because I've been talking a lot, and think about what are these hard and soft arrangements of working from home, and what are some of the ideas embedded in these arrangements. Again, you can unmute yourself or just add to the chat.
I mean, not everybody may have access to Wi-Fi or computer.
Absolutely, right? So there's ideas about accessibility that might not be right. And there's the hard infrastructures, right, of computers, maybe having to share a computer with a child at home, right? The arrangements of distance learning. The idea that everyone can multitask, totally. The idea of working hours, right? So ideas about what does it mean to have working hours and how has that changed since we've been working at home? Thank you, Taylor. I think we've seen some ideas about gender and how much pressure this has put on working moms and certainly on parents overall. Other ideas embedded in these arrangements? The soft arrangement that you're always available since you're at home, going along with that idea of working hours. Thank you. All right, thank you. And just remembering that these are overlapping and that they're producing effects. The idea that anyone can teach, right? That parents are supposed to be able to teach as well as teachers. and the relationships inside the home, who's doing what, when. So all of these soft arrangements and complexities where we're sharing computers and we're trying to teach and we're trying to work, trying to feed ourselves and each other. Thank you. And then thinking about the effects, not the effects that are the big effects that we're fighting every day, negative effects. I want to say there's also positive effects, of course, and the little things that we're experiencing every day. So we might be thinking, right, we have these big effects that we're really taking on and facing in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on the arts sector, right? So taking on how it's impacted us in terms of theaters and museums closing, the challenges to our nonprofits, the loss of jobs, the challenges to artists who are being seen as, you know, gig workers and what that meant, but also the little effects, right? The stress that we're experiencing, like you guys were just addressing, right? Of trying to be on our computers at all different times of day and night, trying to be parents and workers at home if we're parenting. So these big and little things are accumulating. And as they come at us fast and furious, we're not always able to, or even have the tendency to go back and question the arrangements, right? We tend to question and bounce from one effect to the next. So I want to pivot into thinking about how we might step into this moment, this opportunity where we've learned, for better and for worse, that so many arrangements can change so fast. How are we, well, let me just give Arundhati a moment too, because she says it so well. She says, we can choose to walk through the portal, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So we're in this moment, right? Not only do we need to imagine another world, but really be ready to fight for it. And I think we've spoke of that a little bit, even in the context of voting, right? To say, if we're imagining another world, what will it take to enact that world? And I would say for us, what does it take and what role do we have as artists and arts organizations? Because imagination is something that we really bring. Imagination and the ability to embody and propose possible new arrangements. And so I want to think a little bit about how do we intervene in existing arrangements, whether they're the arrangements of voting and advocacy and grant making and gig workers, and how do we imagine new ones? And how do we not just sometimes follow instincts to get back where we were, right? Because we're missing so much of what we had, even when we know that there's elements that were unjust. How do we imagine new arrangements that might be more just, more joyful, more convivial? And so we think about intervening in existing arrangements. And I'll give a couple examples and then just open it up if folks want to share your own examples or ask any questions. Some of you were a part of this last year, back when we weren't wearing masks and we were out in public at Downtown Crossing in Upham's Corner. We think about public making as our collective ability to activate a public space. And so in Boston, which is a city that is still very neighborhood based in that you're expected to sort of engage your cultural world in your neighborhood. And if you're at the heart of the city, it's primarily a commercial heart of the city, but also even in our cultural spaces at the heart of the city, it's not a very diverse city. Or I shouldn't say that, that's not true. It doesn't program itself as the diverse city that it is. So we wanted to bring Boston together in the heart of the city and do some public making as an intervention in the hard and soft arrangements of spatial injustice. We did in public, both at the heart of the city in Downtown Crossing and in Upham's Corner, which is the neighborhood where we work. Really intentionally inviting people in to dance, to have panels. Cara was on a panel with us, to draw, to do healing, to hear comedy. We were listening to 1491's, an indigenous comedy troupe. Unbound Bodies was doing hair braiding and storytelling and hopscotch and podcasts. So again, intervening in existing arrangements as one way to create change and to think about how do we hold arrangements accountable. Oops. And then thinking about how do we imagine new arrangements? What do we bring as artists, designers, arts organizations to actually imagining new arrangements, to going beyond just saying we wish it were like it was before, or to going beyond to say, hey, in Denver they have this, or in France they have this. but what might we imagine for this moment? A couple examples that we've done. This one here was really thinking about this drive of privatization and saying, what if we took a step and imagined us going the opposite direction and imagining new public infrastructures? And we took something that felt very private, like the kitchen, and we said, what if kitchens were public, like libraries? How could that change social life? And how could we create a micro space where that's true, so that we could collectively, with passersby, residents, merchants, artists, actually embody a public kitchen as a new arrangement with radical chef cook-offs and recipe shares and equipment shares and collective cooking, so that it was different than when you say public kitchen and people say, oh, that must be like a soup kitchen. And they have arranged this idea of the other that needs food, and this idea of the self that doesn't need food, or, you know, wouldn't go to a public kitchen, right? And so when you create something that feels different than that, then they can say, oh, I was lonely and I went to the public kitchen, or I needed a big pot, or I wanted to meet people, or I wanted to cook together, in this way that we understand that libraries are places that we might all benefit from, or museums or theaters. Another productive fiction that we created was the idea of a social emergency response center. We actually, the first social emergency response center took place in Four Corners in Dorchester right after the Trump inauguration in the winter of 2017. And we thought about, if emergency response centers existed to help us recover from the sorts of emergencies like hurricanes, fires, and earthquakes, what did we need to take on the ongoing social emergency that we found ourselves in? Thinking about police brutality in communities of color, thinking about the climate crisis, thinking about what Trump was bringing to the table, all of these things. And so we created a social emergency response center. And I would say, I'm gonna pause here and just ask y'all, I can show a short video that sort of captures it, or I can show how we're doing it online now. So, or I can wrap it up. I don't know what your time is like. So you tell me, I can go in a few different directions. The video is about 3 minutes, or I can walk us through the slides.
I think we have time for the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me, I'll share my screen, and you guys holler if it's not working. I'll try to maximize it for a video here. Sorry, just a second here. There we go.
The horrifying Trump win underscores the fact that we're all living in a social emergency, even if it affects each of us differently. In other kinds of emergencies like earthquakes or tsunamis, hurricanes, there's emergency response centers to help coordinate food, shelter, information. So we felt like we needed a social emergency response center to take on the real and pressing social emergencies that we are facing right now.
We're creating a space where people can come in and express how they're feeling and then pivot into collective action. By the time people leave, we want them to be able to express what they're doing.
With Trump trying to dangerously narrow the definition of what it means to be an American, circs are places where you can bring your whole damn self. We welcome everyone, from frontline activists to local neighbors, artists, healers, children, and concerned allies. The circ is a place where folks can feed their mind, body, and spirit. Circs include creative action, healing, collective art making, cooking, performances, and more. In emergencies, we need information. The plotting room includes our political workshops, our radical library, and interactive ways of reimagining this work. We're figuring out how we're tracking this storm and how we're reconstructing democracy after it.
Circs help us recognize we're in a social emergency. They're an orientation space. They help us move from despair, rage, and hopelessness into collective radical action.
It's ended up being a space where there's actually room for exchange and you can actually see the change happening.
I've made connections with people that outside of the space I don't know if I would cross paths with some of the people that I've met today.
The circ is an idea of bringing people together to reflect of what is happening in the other space, to then reflect how can we organize what we should do it, and I think that is an idea that's going to spread.
Boston was just the beginning. Communities around the country.
And trim that right there with Alvaro, right there from the city of Boston. So I would also say we decided we were still, of course, in a moment of social emergency, and we can't gather in the same way. Not that I'm, telling anyone something they don't know, but we're like, we still need a circ. We still need a space that brings us together and helps us turn towards each other in this time of both metaphorical and real social distancing, right? We need a space where we can come together. And so we are recreating the circ online. Over the next 7 weeks, we've created a virtual space that people can go to asynchronously and share resources, but also a space that we can go to together. Every Wednesday afternoon, we have plotting, making, healing, and cooking. If I have another 30 seconds, let me share a little slide just to show you how it works, because I would love it if any of you all wanted to come, or if you wanted to share this with other neighbors, friends, artists. We actively invite folks to lead workshops. They're 40-minute workshops, so people can come for a quick piece or come and stay for the day. Let me show you how it looks online, and then I'll sort of tell you a little bit how we zoom in and out, as it were. Here we are. So the online circ is, learned this from some teacher friends of mine. It's done in Google Slides. And you can actually get around each of our spaces just by, here's our welcome. We have a plotting room. And each week we have our workshops. This coming week, Finding What You're For with the University of Orange, and Political Weather Series about the Philippines. We have our ongoing resources. We have a giant text that people can write on, like in a Google Doc form. And again, we have a healing space. So each week we have healing workshops like the Altars and Flowers and Meditative Movement with True Peace and Wellness, one of our artists from along the Fairmount Cultural Corridor. Cooking and food justice. We have a food justice and the social emergency workshop coming up, as well as ongoing toolkits, conversations, links to past presentations. The making space is always busy. We've done zines and drawing and a virtual space, the campfire, other things that are ongoing for artists and cultural workers. So again, I wanted to just give you a little glimpse into that. All of the workshops are actually done on Zoom. People pop around from one workshop to the next using the virtual space, as well as what we call the Circ Lounge, where we help connect people to the different spaces. So would love, if it's something that speaks to you or something that speaks to someone that you know, we'd love to have you there. Or if there's something you'd like to present, whether it's about your own advocacy or if it's an artistic piece, let us know. But really didn't come to promote so much as to just kind of share those ideas and see, if they feel useful in terms of thinking about this moment and imagining new arrangements together.
Thanks, Lori. And I'd love to open it up and hear anyone's kind of reactions or questions or thoughts. And I would just say that part of what I think is really helpful about this framework that Lori shared of ideas, arrangements, and effects is that even with everyone, including everyone on the call, trying to be so responsive and trying to pivot and adapt so many things, it's like 8 months in. And so in some ways we're already like in we're in the rhythm of whatever that response is, right? Like even those things, those new kinds of arrangements that we might have created or be in can still use room to rethink and to take a step back and say, okay, wait, if we're doing the same thing, you know, at this point, what has kind of calcified, has something kind of, even in our adapting and responding, have we like gotten frozen in something where we, you know, aren't taking stock? And I feel that myself. Lori was on our, or is still maybe technically on our advisory group for the Radical Imagination for Racial Justice grant that we've been working on all year. And through that, you know, the whole purpose of that project is to try to flip the script about foundation funding and supporting artists' work and trying to undo a lot of the kind of harm and just kind of like non-humanness of map making. And even in that, and in trying to support applicants as much as possible to be imaginative and radical in their process, we ourselves, you know, replicated a lot of things that we were trying to undo, right? And we, by the end of the process, we were like, did we have time ourselves to like really have space to radically reimagine as much as we wanted to? Like, are we actually like living the thing that we're trying to do through this process? So I think that it's just a really helpful framework to start to just create some space and take a little bit of time to actually like be more free in our thinking about what's possible and what we could be doing. So I'll stop there and would love to hear anybody's thoughts or questions.
Ron has a question in the chat. How is the we created and with whom? I think that's a really interesting question anytime we talk about a we. Currently, the we kicked off the CERC collaborating with many of the artists we've worked with before, particularly artists along the Fairmount Cultural Corridor and other folks who had been a part of CERCs around the country. And we are continuing to try to grow the we in terms of not only inviting people to come to the CERC, inviting people to lead activities at the CERC, and also inviting people to use the space to run their own CERCs. So right now, for example, we're in conversation with Unbound Bodies that's interested in doing a CERC that's entirely for queer, trans, folks of color. So trying to really think about the we and maybe about possible different we's, but trying to expand it as a way to say, how are we turning towards each other in this time to really address the social emergency.
Any other reactions or questions for Lori? I'm super impressed with how good the Google slide rooms look. Like, I think you figured something out there that we might have to steal.
Ayako gets a lot of credit for that.
All right. Well,
Thanks
we
so
might
much.
be in the arrangement of Friday afternoon right now. It's like, look around. But Lori, if folks want to get in touch with you or participate in a CERC or learn more, how should they do that?
I put the link to the virtual space in the chat. I can also put my email. If you just go to, we also have I'll put the CERC page in that has some of the resources from our past CERCs as well as some of the thinking behind it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, all of you. Thanks for taking the time.
All right. So I think that's what we have today. I'm looking at Pascal to confirm. And I guess if anybody has any other questions about anything going on or wants to share anything, we've got a few minutes left. So does anybody have anything else that they want to chime in? Or any events or things people want to promote? Oh yeah, Veronica, go ahead.
Hello everyone. We are hosting our annual Day of the Dead celebration. This time is going to be virtual. We are going to raise our altar as always. We usually have a parade, walking parade, but this year we talked to Adrian Madaro and Lydia Edwards, and we thought that it would be a good idea to do a car parade. So there's no social interaction, just in the cars, and it's gonna be from 2 to 3. We're just gonna meet on Central Square Park, Liberty Square, and we're gonna go around Meridian Street, U-turn on Maverick Station, and come back to the same place where our cultural center is located. And we we will provide kits for families. Also, thanks to Adrian Madaro, who sponsored 30 kits. So we will provide them to some of the families in East Boston, so they can create their headpiece and their makeup and sugar skulls. So we're gonna have tutorials on Sunday at 11 o'clock. So there's a lot of activities we're offering. And so if you wanna find out more about it, you can check our website, vrocc.org, and also on our Facebook page, Veronica Robles Cultural Center. And we have a lovely video of last year, some of the pictures of last year, where you can see the costumes, the whole outfit, the Katrina outfit. And this year we are celebrating and honoring the lives of, lost to COVID and first responders. And we are asking people to send their photos or obituaries, so we can share it in on our altar. We're gonna have like a screen, and we will share them also during our virtual presentation with a hashtag. And VROC is challenging rappers to come and talk about social justice during the celebration. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And we can find that the link for the website and put that in our follow-up email so that people can access that. Any other announcements or things to share or questions? The next time we meet is after the election. Is that right? Okay. So maybe we'll hold off on the agenda planning. So we can give ourselves whatever we need. Okay. All right.
We do have a circ the day after the election.
Oh, perfect. Great. Yeah, okay. All right, if that's it, everybody have a good weekend, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.